This is Dr. Crystal Ellerson, and today in this video we're going to learn about the Layout tab in Microsoft Word, the desktop version. If you are in Windows, your Layout tab should look like this. I'm going to zoom in a bit. You should be able to see your margins, the orientation, size, columns, and everything else here. Now, if your tab looks like this, also called a ribbon, okay? This means you are in Microsoft Word Online. This is not the same version. Things are not going to be in the same place, and not all of the same features exist. So, if you're in that right now, what you need to do is close the window, and I'm going to zoom back out. So close the window, open Microsoft Word from your desktop programs, and then open the file that you want to work on. That's if you're in a version that looks like this. Going back. So back in Microsoft Word, again, desktop version, we are going to go through and look at the available options. So if you go to the upper left-hand corner where the margins are, you can click on the drop-down. The standard margins are set to 1 inch all the way around, and that's what you want for most documents. There's no reason to change that unless you are working with different document design. When we get to writing instructions or you're doing your own design, you may end up changing the margins here. And you can go in to customize the margins. So let's say for some reason you're setting a book and you have to have what's called a gutter. That gutter indents some of your pages a little bit further on the left and some a little bit on the right. So when the book is put together, it comes out evenly instead of having everything crowded in by the spine. So those are reasons why you might come in here and make those changes. You can change the top, left, bottom, right, all of those. And I realize it's kind of small on your screen, but you can change everything right here. You can also change your orientation here. You can go from portrait to landscape, which will, if you look at the preview, shift and make your document wider. You can set up if you want to have your margins mirrored. If you want to have 2 pages on a sheet, so you can set it up for a book fold if you're looking for that. We won't use a whole lot of that in class. We will end up staying just normal. And you can also decide if you want to apply whatever changes you make in here to the entire document. If you have a section break in here, which we'll talk about in a minute, you can divide your document so you have one page set up portrait, which is what we're used to, and you might have a page that has tables or charts set up in landscape. Okay, you can choose to set this as your default as well, so it always sets up the same way. Now if we click on the drop down up here for orientation, we can also switch from portrait and landscape there. The size button will allow you to change page sizes. And so you can go from letter to legal if you want a wider page. You can go with the British layouts, A5, A4. You can have it in millimeters. You can have set up defaults, or you can go in where there are more paper sizes and you can set up custom sizes here. And notice that we're in the same page setup dialog box. That's what these boxes that pop up are called, where the margins were. We are just on the next tab over. You can set up sources and things like that, but that's only if you're going to print. Right now, we can just change the page sizes here, and you can choose to apply to a whole document, or if there's a section break, you can set up specific print options. You can work with columns in your document. You can choose the standards of just one column, which is what we normally have, 2, 3 left, right columns. But you can go into more columns and you can set up specific spacing. So if I wanted to have, say, this left column here, I could choose to make my right column wider if I wanted to. This can be good for when you're setting up resumes. If you want to make sure that the left column is where all of your headings are and everything stays there, and then you want most of your information on the page to be on the right-hand side. You can have a line automatically show up between on the page so you can see where the columns are going to end. You can leave the line there or not. It's up to you. You can choose to make the columns equal. And you can, again, choose to apply to just a section. Now, right now, we haven't put in section breaks yet, but we will. So now I'm getting to breaks. When you click on the drop down for breaks, you're given a large number of options. Much of the time, if you're just wanting to get to the next page, a page break will be what you need. And so let me show you. I'm going to go down and just put some text underneath this image. This little code will give me 10 paragraphs. All right, so I now have some text. If I want to separate this text, I want to get to the next page, but I don't want to hit enter to get there. Okay. What I like to do instead is I turn on the paragraph marks on the home ribbon so I can see things that are in the background. And so instead of hitting enter to get to the next page, say I want to move this paragraph down. Okay. I don't want to do it this way because that ends up having these invisible marks on the page and it causes images to move if I move them around that way. So instead, I'm going to want to use a break. And so I would go to the Layout tab, Break, and choose Page Break just to get to the next page. What you see when you have a page break is this single dotted line and the word page break in the middle. When we turn off our paragraph marks, we cannot see it. It's invisible. It doesn't print, but it's extremely valuable when you're working with your document design. Now, just a page break, though, does not separate the sections of a document. So I'm going to delete my page break, and I am going to instead put in a different type of break. This is called a section break. This allows me to get my stuff to the next page and break my document into sections within the code. So I'm going to go down to the second section here where it says section breaks, and I'm going to choose next page. Now, this one, if I get it down on its own line, goes across the whole page, and it is two lines, two dotted lines instead of one, and it says section break and next page in there. Okay, this way we have told the document code that we have two different sections. So now I could go down to this second page and choose to put this page in columns. And so I could go back over here and choose my left-right columns. And now I didn't change the layout of the first page, I did the second page. Let's say I want to move this text right here over to this column, and I don't want to hit enter going there. I can go wherever I want to put in the break. So I usually do it at the end of the paragraph, or I put it in right at the top so I know what's coming on the next page will be the very top thing. And so I can go back to breaks, and I can go to column break. And that will move this over without me having to hit enter all those times on the way down. Line numbers are something we won't really use in this class, but I'm going to cover it. It's just if, let's say, you're a poet and you want to have what's on each line, or let's say you work with code, you may have the line numbers there. Now notice I have it on this page because I'm in this section. If I wanted to have it on this page, I would have to have clicked over on this page to apply it. Okay, so that's pretty much working with columns, working with breaks. Now there are other types of breaks, continuous, so if you want to make sure that the next section starts on the same page, so instead of moving to a new page, but we still want to divide a section of a document. So again, I'm going to go down, I'm going to move some text to the next page. Let's say I go right here. I'm going to do the next page section break, and then I'm going to change from columns back, or one column. It's where I want to be here. Okay, let's say on this page, I want to add another section break, but I don't want to move to the next page. In that case, I would choose a continuous section break. And if I had two of them on the same page, I could format this one little section of the page differently, so I could make it into 3 columns if I wanted to. Again, if I go and I turn off the paragraph marks, you cannot see those section breaks, but you see how you can set up different page designs this way. Hyphenation, all that is will we do it automatically, manually, or do you allow it? I tend to not allow hyphenation that breaks at the end of a line because it interferes with readability. So let's take a look at the indent options here. We can choose if we want to indent the text. So going down to this page, if I wanted, say, this particular paragraph to be indented on the left-hand side, I can choose to set the indent manually. I could also do the same thing on the right-hand side to make some text stand out. This is good when working with quotes. You can also change your paragraph spacing here. Notice how I have space after each paragraph. This is standard, and I didn't have to hit enter to get that space. So if I go and I turn those paragraph marks back on, and I come back to the Layout tab, you'll notice that I don't have an enter between each paragraph to get that space. So how you control the spacing is one way you can do it is you can highlight the text, and you can actually go through and set it to usually size 12 is what we want. If our body text is size 12, we put that amount of space after it. The default is set to 8. The smallest you usually want to go is 6. Anything below that you usually don't want if you are not putting a paragraph mark between each. If you are putting a paragraph mark between each section, okay, which is something you would do when you really want to control the spacing, then you would set this to 0. But you could also go in and control the size of that paragraph mark. And so let's say you wanted it to be size 8 to put less space. Okay, this would just be another way of taking control of the spacing. But it's usually better to go through and set it up in the spacing here. It usually just makes things work better for you, and you don't have to worry about hitting enter an extra number of times. You get consistent spacing this way. You can also get to this by clicking this little box in the lower right-hand corner. It will take you in and let you control the indents and the spacing more directly. So you can set up single space. You can set up your before and after. Here, you can get to this from the Layout tab. Now let's take a look at the images, the Arrange section, which is the last part of the Layout tab that I'm planning to cover. So I put this image in here so I could click on it and show you things. When you first insert an image, whether you just do a copy and paste or you use the insert menu, however you bring in an image, it comes in as if it were a word, okay? And so it doesn't, you can't just drag it and move it around. It thinks, the program thinks or acts like this is a word. So you would end up, you could move it by spacing. All right, so I hit enter, it moves down. I go to the next line, I hit the space bar, I indent. When I hit the space bar, it puts those little dots there. But we want to be able to move it. So what we do is we can change the wrapping. And so instead of being in line with text, you can make it where the text wraps around it as a square. You can make it where it's tight. Okay, this often matters if there's different shapes. You can make it where the text, or it goes through the text. You can have the text on the top or bottom. Okay, you can set it behind the text. You can set it in front of the text. And then there are other layout options here as well. Most of the time we'll end up using top and bottom because it makes the spacing simplest. Other times we'll use square or tight. So now I have the text wrapped around my image, and I can move the image freely at this point. The text moves because I've moved the image, and it's wrapping around it, going to the top or the bottom of it. This is a special type of text box called callout. If I move it down here, though, it's behind the image, which I don't want. So I can go up here and I can choose bring forward or bring in front of text. Okay, I can choose bring to front, and this will end up allowing you to have different layers within the document itself. I can click on the selection pane so I could go over if I'm having trouble selecting and choose the image that I want. I can choose how I want to align things on the page. I could have it set to align to my margin. To see the margin, you may want to go down and turn on grid lines. When you go to view grid lines, this shows you where your margins are. So you want to make sure that your images, unless they are part of the page design itself, okay, do not go out to the left of the margin or further to the left than the text immediately above, and that they don't go out to the right of your margin. Sometimes, instead of dragging with a mouse, you'll want to use your arrow keys on your keyboard just to make that last little alignment adjustment. Now, you can see the different options here. We can do other things with our images. We can rotate them. Okay, so let's say that I wanted to just click rotate. This little circle right here allows me to do a free rotate. Or I could choose just to flip things. Okay, for some reason I wanted to flip it horizontally. There we are. You can also group things. When you want to group items, you hold down the control key so you can select more than one item at a time. And while you're holding the control key, you can select a second image. And so now you see that I have little white dots all the way